Welcome to the Wonderful Seagulls podcast, where we explore the loud, clever, chaotic world of urban gulls. Before we dive into today's gull story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more urban wildlife, gull behavior, and neighborhood drama. So, when you see a gull perched on a street lamp or maybe aggressively eyeing up your chips, you probably just think of them as these opportunistic scavengers, living totally day to day. But their reality is so deeply complex and biologically extraordinary. It turns out an urban gull can actually survive in the city for up to 30 years. That's an incredibly long time for a wild bird. I mean, think about it. Navigating 3 decades of coastal storms, busy city streets, and really intense colony dynamics. It takes a lot of adaptability to survive that long. Exactly. And living for 30 years isn't just about getting older. These birds undergo massive behavioral and physical transformations along the way. Today, we're going to map out that whole incredible chronological journey. It basically starts with their first year, which is, let's politely call it, the awkward juvenile phase. Then they spend a few years figuring things out before hitting their prime adult peak, usually from about age 4 to 12. After that, they enter their senior or senescent years, stretching all the way from 13 to 29. That phase actually involves some surprisingly relatable lifestyle choices, like taking sabbaticals. And finally, they go through what biologists call a terminal collapse. Let's just get right into it. Let's kick things off with that first, very clumsy juvenile year. Young gulls face a huge developmental bottleneck. It's not that they're uncoordinated, they just haven't developed the spatial memory or the sophisticated handling skills they need to hunt effectively on their own. So they go through this hilarious teenage pirate phase. Biologically, it's called kleptoparasitism, which is really just a very formal way of saying they steal other animals' food to survive. It really is endearing when you look at the data and see just how heavily they rely on it. A staggering 75% of a juvenile gull's diet can come strictly from piracy. But the funny thing is, they're kind of terrible at it. Because they completely lack experience, they make the worst choices about who to rob. You'll see this young gull try to pirate food from highly maneuverable birds like crows or jackdaws, or they'll even try picking fights with big, dominant adult gulls. It usually fails spectacularly, but, it's a totally essential trial and error period for them. And you really see the payoff of all that trial and error when you look at a mature adult's diet. It is a massive shift. For prime adults, direct capture makes up 94% of their diet, and piracy drops down to almost zero. It literally takes a gull almost a decade of practice to perfect these highly skilled tactics like marine plunge diving. Older birds get so experienced that they'll even deliberately abort a dive midway through if they realize it's unproductive, just so they can conserve their metabolic energy. Right, and that level of skill points to something we love talking about on this show, their extreme intelligence. As they mature, gulls demonstrate remarkably high cognitive plasticity. They are unbelievably observant of human behavior. Have you ever noticed a gull seeming to want the exact snack you're holding? It's because they have such fine-scale object memory that they will literally match the color of the food wrappers humans are holding to make their own foraging choices. They're actively learning socially from us. But there is an unfortunate trade-off to city life for these brilliant birds. All that brain plasticity requires specific nutrients to maintain itself over a 30-year lifespan. A natural marine diet is packed with omega-3 fatty acids, which keeps their brains healthy and maintains that lifelong cognitive flexibility. But when they adapt to an urban diet that's heavily reliant on human refuse, they're missing out on those crucial omega-3s. Sadly, over a long period, this highly processed urban diet can actually degrade their gray matter and diminish their spatial memory as they get older. And age definitely catches up with them, eventually leading into those senior or senescent years. Honestly, it's hard not to feel sympathy for older gulls because their behavior becomes so relatable. When they just don't have the metabolic energy for the absolute chaos of raising chicks, they actually take non-breeding sabbatical years. They'll go through their feather molt weeks earlier than active parents, and they totally avoid the loud, stressful nesting colony. They'll just opt for quiet loofing zones instead. And if a senior pair simply lacks the coordination to successfully defend a nest, they experience really high rates of divorce. They just don't have the energy for the drama anymore. That energetic decline also shows up in something biologists call the maternal depletion effect. When senior females do try to breed, they really struggle. While an 8-year-old prime adult female is basically at peak performance, packing her eggs with all these essential nutrients, a senescent mother, say 15 or older, faces a steep drop-off. The concentration of crucial antioxidants like lutein and vitamin A in her eggs drops significantly. That makes it so much harder for her chicks to build strong immune systems or survive those super vulnerable early weeks. Which brings us to a really sobering but naturally curious question. With all of this resilience, all this cleverness, and unmatched adaptability, what actually takes down a senior gull after 2 or 3 decades? Once they've survived literally everything the city and the coast can throw at them, it's very rarely a predator that gets them.
Yeah, it usually comes down to the chronic diseases of old age. Specifically, it's a biological cascade called systemic AA amyloidosis. It generally starts with chronic inflammation, which is sometimes triggered by years of that urban diet or environmental stressors. The gull's liver begins overproducing a specific protein called SAA. Over time, those proteins misfold and deposit as amyloid fibrils, which severely damages the kidneys and the spleen. Ultimately, this leads to renal failure. The bird can't excrete uric acid anymore, resulting in a fatal condition known as visceral gout.
And right alongside that internal cascade, they're just dealing with the everyday physical hurdles of getting older. Living a highly physical, demanding life takes its toll. Senior gulls frequently suffer from severe arthritis caused by minor foot injuries or bacterial infections, which causes painful lameness. They can also develop cataracts, sometimes made worse by eye parasites like the Philothelmus fluke. When a bird relies so heavily on binocular vision and agile flight just to hunt, those ailments make daily life totally exhausting. Yet, despite all of these ailments, researchers have discovered this truly remarkable thing called the terminal year phenomenon. Gulls don't typically just fade away slowly over many years of decreasing performance. Instead, they maintain an incredibly high level of survival and breeding success right up until the very end. Then, in their final year of life, their bodies undergo a sudden, dramatic, and systemic breakdown. It's an abrupt physical collapse rather than a slow retirement. What's especially fascinating there is how differently the sexes handle that final chapter. So while senior females tend to show a slightly more gradual, age-dependent decline in their egg quality and laying dates leading up to that final year, senior males adopt a completely different tactic. They go for an all-in terminal investment. A male in his final breeding season will completely exhaust his last remaining bodily reserves, rapidly losing body mass and feather condition, all just to successfully raise one final brood of chicks before he dies. But here is perhaps the ultimate biological plot twist of the entire gull lifespan. We've talked about gout, arthritis, and organ failure. But despite living for 3 decades, often in heavily polluted urban environments, gulls have an evolutionary superpower. They almost never get cancer. It's a true biological paradox that scientists call the senescent shield. It is absolutely incredible. Their genomes actively fight off tumor growth. As they age, senior gulls undergo these coordinated genetic shifts, specifically down-regulating certain oncogenes. They lower the expression of genes like STK11 to prevent excessive cell growth, SETD1B to control cellular division, and TRIM33 to suppress bone tumors. They are effectively turning off their cancer risk at the cellular level, basically guaranteeing they can survive to those extreme ages of 20 or 30 years. It completely transforms the way you look at them, doesn't it? The next time you see a gull navigating a crowded seaside promenade or a busy city centre, you aren't just looking at a loud bird looking for a snack. You are looking at a brilliant, highly adaptable survivor that navigates complex social structures, modifies its own genetic expression to fend off cancer, and possesses a genomic resilience that human medicine could genuinely learn from. They are absolute biological marvels. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like the video and subscribe for more gull stories, urban wildlife, and the ongoing adventures of gulls.